During childhood, the brain manufactures billions more connections than it can ever use, giving each of us innumerable options about what we learn and in what we can excel. But it's a case of use it or lose it. As childhood ends, a dramatic pruning process occurs. The well-used connections are strengthened. Seldom used links die off. By the time we're teenagers, only half of them remain. But that's just part of the story. There's a lot more going on inside the teen brain, though at times it seems like
you don't really know where you're going to go until that minute, and then you end up somewhere.
You can't plan like what you're going to do on the weekends, because anything can happen.
I just wanted to do it, just because of the look. It's probably like, it's like...
One day I just said, let's do it, so I just did it.
Randomness is sometimes it's exciting.
Recently, science has confirmed what parents have suspected for eons. The teen brain really is different. Dr. Jürgen Todd has observed some profound differences in how teens and adults process emotional information.
Essentially, when we compared adult brains to teenage brains, what we found was that adults use their frontal cortex to process information, whereas teenagers use an older part of the brain, the amygdala, to process information.
The amygdala was one of the early structures to develop as our brains evolved. It's where instinctive reactions, such as anger and fear, reside. It may not be surprising that the teen brain uses it much more than the adult brain does. As we mature, stronger connections are made among the different structures in our brains. The instinctive reactions of the amygdala become tempered by the frontal cortex, which is the human brain's crowning achievement. It's where planning, reason, and moral judgment reside. An active frontal cortex is a sign of both emotional maturity and intelligence. So, what would the brain of a genius look like? And what if he was a teenager? We brought child prodigy Michael Carney to Boston, along with his father, for a unique test. No one had looked inside the working brain of a genius before. Would Jürgen Todd see more connections or cortical area? And would his brain function more like an adult or a teenager? He's been called one in a billion. In 1994, Michael was the youngest person ever to graduate from college, at the tender age of 10. It was his third of 4 Guinness World Records.
Michael Kevin Kearney, cum laude.
I was the youngest person to graduate from high school at 6. Also at 6, I was the youngest person to enter college. At 10, the youngest person to graduate from college, and at 14, I was the youngest person with a master's degree. It's I'm a 32-bit kid in an 8-bit world. I've always had to balance the adult and the child side. I still play video games, read comic books, all that sort of regular kid stuff. It's sort of odd because when I do act normal, when I do act like a regular kid, they say, "Oh, you're so immature." Duh, I'm 15. And then when I act adult, they say, "Oh, you have no social life."
Michael is what's known as an omnibus prodigy. He excels at whatever he sets his mind to. His IQ goes beyond anything measurable. When we took Michael to see Dr. Jürgen Todd, she wasn't quite sure what she'd see.
One question we'd like to be able to answer is, how is a genius different than a normal in terms of brain processing? And one way that we think this might occur is that the networks, that the brain connections are different in individuals who are gifted or exceptional.
The team will give Michael different kinds of tasks and then record what areas of his brain become active. With his impressive mental abilities, they expect his frontal lobe to override the more emotional reactions of his amygdala.
How you doing, Michael?
Okay.
Okay, Michael, the table will move now.
Okay.
They start by asking Michael to name as many words as he can that start with a given letter, which utilizes his intellect.
So wrong.
He does extremely well.
Hey, Michael. Michael, how you doing?
Okay.
Okay, it's just going to be a minute. I need to look at these pictures.
Next,
and then
he
we'll
looks
set
at
up to do the
photographs
next set
of
pictures,
people
okay?
and interprets the emotion on their faces. This one requires more subjective judgment, and Michael has some trouble.
Annoyance?
Okay.
The results of Michael's tests led Jurgel and Todd to some intriguing observations.
The emotional task showed that he performed very much like a typical adolescent, and that is his amygdala activated, but his frontal lobes did not significantly activate. Whereas when we asked him to carry out a word production task, Michael completed this task predominantly with his frontal lobes. So on the task that was more cognitive, he was very adult-looking, and on the task that was very emotional, he looked very much like an adolescent. We really don't know why Michael is as bright as he is, why he can process information as quickly as he can. We can certainly say that the percentage of brain volume that includes frontal cortex is greater, so perhaps he has more network capacity in that region of the brain.
So perhaps a superior intellect is a combination of activating more gray matter, or cortex, and having more connections. Regardless of brain power, it takes time for emotion and intellect to connect and create maturity.